Are you living the life you want and being true to yourself? And here's where it gets even trickier. In the midst of living your life and being true to you, are you also able to live more inclusively and walk the talk? Are you welcoming the ideas and engagement from others who may be different from you? And as my guest today, Debbie, is going to share, are you pausing and thinking critically? Wherever you are, understanding the full scope of how you were raised, all the layers of your story, all the predestination labels we were supposed to be when we grew up, but how it's shaping your world. So I believe as I've aged a little bit, I've successfully overcome these detours and I've become more open-minded, but I've also had to redefine me and reimagine who I am and what my life looks like. So I embrace these challenges, even when it's uncomfortable or painful, because I believe actually walking through this is what's making us stronger and more resilient. So it's perfect that today, with so much turmoil going on, I have the wonderful opportunity to interview and learn from Debbie Shear. Debbie has successfully navigated and survived much, which she's going to dive into in a bit. But her life twists and turns have really shaped who she is. And she's now using her journey to create personal connections and inspire through humor. So join us today as we dive into how these layers of our experience and our story have opened up this whole new path that we didn't see coming. So Billie Eilish has a song out right now called My Future. And if you listen to the lyrics, she states, I'm in love with my future. Can't wait to meet her. Just want to get to know myself. So how are you getting to know yourself? Debbie is with me today, and she has many descriptors, but she's a professional speaker, a humorist, an auctioneer, and has a knack for creating personal connections. So welcome, Debbie.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
It's great to see you. And I got to meet Debbie through Second Act Women. And so Lupe and Barb have been on my podcast before. And it's been a wonderful way to meet women, again, in our 40s and 50s who are really redefining our paths going forward. So really great to have you here this morning.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
What's nice is that Debbie's just down the road from me in Denver, which is great. And we've got gorgeous weather. So in looking at and diving a little further into Debbie's story, she's got great pictures. We bonded already that we both had perms in the 80s, which I love. And we also were married for a hot minute. But I'm going to let Debbie hop in here and start to tell a little bit more about her experiences and the life that she's led through her adult years that has gotten her today to know much more confidently who she is and overcome the challenges of all those, again, labels we thought we would have when we would be 50 or 55, whatever, and how you're using that now today to inspire others. So Debbie, take me back to the perm and the wedding dress.
Oh,
what's happened since then?
Such a painful memory. Those perms that we all thought were such a great idea.
Exactly. So great.
In the moment, I tell the story, my very first perm, my mom dropped me off at the hairdresser's, but my dad was picking me up. And when I went and waited for him in the parking lot, I saw him drive up and drive right by me because he did not recognize me. Awesome. That should have been my first clue to abandon the perm, but I was hooked, right? Like all of us were. The photo, I know, right? The photo that you're referring to is my wedding photo. I am, as I'm sitting here speaking with you, I'm an out queer femme lesbian, very out, and have been for 26 plus years. But that photo was from a marriage. When I was married to a man for 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. We got divorced, not because I knew I was gay, but for other reasons we got divorced. But soon after getting divorced, I started to, have more of these aha moments. Mm-hmm. And came out, and then we'll skip all those years in between where there weren't perms, because that's no fun, right? I wish I had more terrible perm stories, but I think I decided pretty early on I should just cut my hair off because I had no skill set to style it whatsoever when it was longer.
I'm right there with you. Yes, if I can't style it with a fork, I'm out. Yes.
I mean, my kids think it's hilarious. I do not own a brush. I have not owned a brush in almost 18 years, maybe 16. And they're like, what? So, but But then fast forward, to how I got to where I'm at today. My now ex-wife and I were together for almost 11 years. We had adopted two boys. They're now 13 and 10, and we were living our lives. And then one Monday night in February, she let me know that she was no longer in love with me and wanted a divorce and was moving out. And it was said kind of as casually as you might say, could you pass the orange juice or the loaf of bread, whatever. I mean, I know she felt more than that, but that was my take in that moment. And so I had been at home. I was working in the nonprofit sector for quite a few years in reproductive rights. And we decided collectively that I would stay home and be a full-time stay-at-home mom. We had our first child and we had just, adopted our second. And so there I was, right? Like,
Right.
the panic, the sheer panic set in, the oh shit, what? Because in the nonprofit world, you don't leave at that particular level that I was at and leave for 2 to 3 years or whatever it is, 4 or 5 years, and then just walk in and say, hey, I'm back. Can I have my job? It doesn't work like that.
Right.
So I was really terrified. And that is how I made my way to the comedy stage, to try comedy, which, I tell people that I was going through something that was so terrifying to me, this divorce, all of this newness, this uncertainty, this holy shit, this is not what I thought my life would look like, right, at 46 or whatever it was. And I thought, well, maybe I should do something that's even scarier to take my mind off the scary thing that I'm going through, which is terrible advice. Don't ever take advice like that. If anyone gives you that advice, just say no, thank you. But I thought, well, skydiving would be the first scary thing because I'm terrified of heights, but I have two children, two little babes, so I'm not going to do that. And I'd always written comedy and loved comedy. And I thought, well, I'm just going to try comedy. And so I reached out to a friend who owns a bar, and she was so supportive and wonderful and said, yes, come on. We have a comedy show that's done once a week. I'll introduce you to the host. Long story short, they gave me a few minutes. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how this all began, right? Few minutes on a comedy stage where I truthfully thought I would die on that stage.
Yes.
I tell people all the time, when I was downstairs waiting to walk up those stairs, I thought, I'm going to shit myself. Yes. I'm going to throw up. I'm going to have a heart attack. I'm going to die on this stage. But what happened was I didn't die, obviously. Sorry to be a spoiler alert, that didn't happen. But what did happen was something transformative in that when I was done with the set and I went back downstairs, I thought, I'm okay. Like I just did something that was so terrifying to me and I'm okay. And that really set in motion this thought of I'll be okay in this other thing as well. And yeah.
Well, and so talk then a little bit more about your choice to adopt. Yeah. And you've got two boys. Yep. Who, again, one loves Billie Eilish, so that's awesome already.
Yes.
Cool. But how different, again, being a mom to two boys of a different ethnicity, background, race, everything, and how that is further tweaking on the Debbie I see today, like how it shaped not only you survive the relationship and, like you said, gives you the confidence to keep going forward. And yes, you didn't die in this situation, so you can handle other things and become more resilient. But then how did the process through adoption, which I know you write about, which is great, and sharing with others. But how did the process of adoption and then raising the boys shape you today?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to get pregnant. And I tried quite a few times.
That's a funny story, by the way. That was really, your blog is really funny about that.
That story is embarrassing. It's really ridiculous when I think back about it, but it is what it is. And we tried to get pregnant. That didn't work. And I should also say I'm an adult adoptee. I have adopted brothers and a sister. And so I kind of thought, oh, adoption will be great. I'll fully embrace it. It's obviously the path that we're going to go down. But it did take me a little bit longer to completely embrace adoption, because our culture really gives women the message that if you choose to get pregnant, and if you're pregnant, and if you choose to become a mom, you have a lot of worth, right?
Mhm.
We
Yep.
really value you. I mean, yes. So, but in going through the adoption process, it was very eye-opening as far as just having to reframe, if our ultimate goal is to create a family, then the journey towards parenthood might need to look a little bit differently than what we had thought it would look like. So my kids, as I said, are 13 and 10, and we are right now in our country in this firestorm of, social justice, all the things. And it's been very interesting. I mean, as a white mom who walks through the world with an amazing amount of privilege because of the way I look, and to know that my boys, when they're with me, have privilege because of me,
Right.
but knowing that as they are set free out into the world and start to have, they want more freedom, right? Who
Right.
doesn't
Right.
want
Their
more
age. Right.
freedom from their parents? I mean,
Exactly. Right.
it's terrifying. I will not lie about that. It is terrifying to know that my boys, if they go to the 7-Eleven and they have their hoodies on, and
Right.
if their pants are down a little bit too low, they will absolutely be judged.
Yeah. Yeah.
It, so it has really helped me become more aware of my privilege, how I need to use it in positive ways. And yeah, it's the whole experience has been incredibly, eye opening for me. I don't know how it has been for them on that. I can't speak for them.
Right.
I mean, we've had conversations in our home, but yeah, it's an interesting time.
It is, but I'm very grateful that our culture has changed, and you can argue both sides of the coin, right? It's changed a lot in 25, 30 years, but yet there are still ways that we're really held back. And I do feel that there are a lot of people who come from a perspective of either, I always call it like leave it to beaver land, right? I really feel like I grew up in the perfect little leave it to beaver household. My parents are still married and everybody's happy and everything's going to be fine, right? um but there are still these challenges and changes that are still needed in our society. And so how do you balance, again, time for yourself and your personal growth as you're walking this motherhood with your boys, and again seeing a very different world and very different perspective? So how do you balance your needs and your personal growth? Is it organic, and is it part of just what happens as a mom in this role, or do you actually really have to challenge yourself and keep critically questioning things?
Yeah, that's a great question. That has been a huge area of growth for me, because in the beginning, early stages of my divorce, I was still so conditioned to put everybody's needs before mine, right? I was a stay-at-home mom for quite a few years. So every single person in this house, I felt like it's what I had to do because it was the role that I took on willingly and I loved it. But that took a lot of flexing new muscles, right? Which is never without pain or discomfort, I should say. And so learning how to take care of myself first without feeling incredibly guilty and selfish, and creating new boundaries for everybody in the household um, took some time. I feel great about the fact that I think I have come a long way in that. Um, but it's not easy. It's not easy to ever navigate that, and but I do understand. And I'm lucky that I'm able to step back and go, okay, when I'm taking care of myself, I actually do show up as a better parent,
Right.
right? I do show up
Right.
as a better friend, as a better, sister. So ultimately, if that's what I want, then I have to figure it out from the, ground up.
Yeah. And I think one of the key pieces that you kind of touched on that was big for me as well is this challenging of our own descriptors or our own labels, right? And I know when I read more about your adoption story, that you were having a real hard time with not being a woman who was going to be pregnant, right? And I had that same issue. I was married and we were trying to have children and couldn't get pregnant. And it really challenged, oh my gosh, wait, I'm supposed to have 2.2 kids. What's going on? No. This isn't the way it's supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
But each time that happens, it challenged me to further question, how I was raised. And again, not in a judgmental or a negative connotation, but one that challenged the beliefs I grew up with and said, okay, is that what I still believe going forward? And am I surrounding myself with others who think differently and can open my perspective and world? So I know that was challenging for me as well. And I think there's a lot of women who are similar to us in our 40s and 50s. And I think COVID actually is kicking that into high gear for many, whether it's unexpected relationship changes or work changes. Like, you said you were a stay-at-home mom, right? And so, trying to figure out, like you said, oh shit, what am I going to do now? Right.
Yeah.
So all of these are constantly tugging at who we thought we were coming along this journey, right? And who we're going to be tomorrow.
Right.
So, talk more about how your humor, and I love also your MC work, and how you're finding that's also expanding your kind of the path you're on. So, do you have? I'm guessing you probably have a lot of material as a mom of two boys who are 10 and 13, right?
I do.
Just a lot of material right there.
It is. It's been a wealth of material. It's kind of a never-ending well, right? You just dip your cup into that well and go, okay, here we are.
Here we are again.
Yeah.
But what have you gotten? What's something unexpected you've gotten out of your path as a humorist that you didn't see coming?
I have to be honest with you. The entire path is something I didn't see coming, right?
Right.
I hate to say it, but it is so true. And, from that first time on the comedy stage to finding my path of starting to create comedy education shows to being asked to do more speaking and MC work to deciding to go to auctioneering school. I mean, what's happening?
Right.
But I do the lesson that I've learned truly, and I continue to learn it even when I fall down a little bit or stumble or get into that space that every human gets into of questioning, what am I doing? Is that when we are truly doing what we're meant to be doing, which sometimes isn't what we think we should be doing,
Right.
it is amazing to me how the universe opens up and provides these opportunities. So for someone who's religious, that might be God. For someone who's more into, Mother Nature or something, that might be something else. It's all the same. And so that's been the biggest eye-opening lesson aha moment is, oh, this does feel like the right path. And these opportunities keep telling me it's the right path. Let's keep going until we have to, turn a little bit.
Yeah. And I don't know if you feel the same, but I had to get comfortable with having patience with that process.
Yes, and that is not a strong suit of mine at all whatsoever. I am probably, of all the people I know in my life, even including my children, I'm one of the more impatient people I know. And it's really hard.
It is.
And I'm also a reactive person. And so it's a tricky spot to go, Debbie, just breathe, right? Just pull back and breathe and settle in and just take a hot second. The situation will be there in 12 minutes, and just think on it.
Yeah.
So that's been, wow, that's been tricky, but it's okay.
Yeah. Yep. And like you said, the more you start to relax a little bit, have patience with the path opening up, it is for me a similar journey that as I've made decisions in my life and kind of paused, okay, trusted it and moved forward, then these other doors just keep opening and reinforcing that you're on the right path.
Yeah. And I've tried things that I can tell I was pushing too hard, right? There's that difference of, of pushing because you believe in it and you love it and you know, and it's fueling you. That's one thing. And then the pushing of, gosh, I feel like I feel like I constantly have this rock in my shoe and but I keep moving. And then you finally go, well, why in the hell didn't you sit down and just take your shoe off and get the rock out? And then you do that and you put your shoe back on. You're like, oh, well, that feels better. And now you continue. So there have been moments where I've been able to look back at things that didn't work out, and now I see exactly why, and it's okay. But when we're in it, whoa, doesn't feel okay.
Right. Right. But do you feel that going through that again got you to this point?
Oh yeah.
Because I feel like, otherwise I would have been down a different path. So yes,
Totally.
you still, all those failures or those setbacks or challenges, whatever you want to call them, have led you to go, okay, I don't want that anymore. I always think about, you go to the wedding and you go, I never want to have a wedding like that, or I don't want this or this or this, right?
Well, I think that's a great, it's like pruning, if any gardeners, people who love to garden, you have to prune off that dead growth in order for the new growth to come out. And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie, after my divorce and, now that I've had quite a few years post divorce, while my ex is a perfectly wonderful person, and I'm sure she's gone through the same process, you're able to sit and go, wow, not gonna do that again. Not
Right.
not gonna set it up like that again.
Right.
And that's a great thing.
Yeah. And I like your example also of of a gardener, because you're right. You feel like, and we're at that time of year where you feel like you're guilty about cutting the plant off, but that's what gives them new growth and again, flourishes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in the midst of all this change, since many, again, at this stage in our life are also dealing with aging parents and, or challenges with our parents. And it's just ironic, great timing. My mom called me this morning and needed help with an IT issue. And she was very frustrated, but I loved helping her. And I'm going to, so I just can't even imagine when I don't have that opportunity again. So tell me how you're then doing this and dancing with grief as you mentioned this, because that's got to be unbelievably challenging. And I'm sure some of the people who will be listening to this have gone through it as well. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, that's been wowzer. Did that just kick my ass big time? I'm not going to lie about that. I do want to say too that a lot of us in this age, I'll be 53 this month, and not all of us, but many of us grew up in homes where we didn't talk a lot about things that were deeply important. At least that was my family dynamic. My parents, of course, my dad is 85, so they were a different generation, and we just didn't have these conversations. So growing up, I never really learned how to deal with grief and process grief. It just was not something we talked about. That's not good news, because my mom passed away 4.5 years ago, and it was without a doubt the most traumatic experience I have had in my life to date. My mom and I were extraordinarily close. We talked a lot, and she was truly the glue that kept our family together. And she was the true matriarch, right? And so when that was taken away, not only are you dealing with the grief of you've lost your mother, but now you're dealing with the grief of a very different family dynamic, right? Because I still have my siblings, I still have my father, but who's holding this all together now? So that grief, I'm not going to lie, I don't lie about anything, but especially grief, that has taken me, and it is still absolutely, it will be work that never finishes for me. How can it, right? The loss of someone that's significant never ever, it certainly morphs and changes and evolves, but it has been such, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I feel for anyone who is new to this, who is going through it, it's just intense. Intense.
Well, and I've thought somewhat about this already, but your statement about who's holding the family together, that glue, hadn't even crossed my mind yet, because I've been so focused on, my gosh, what am I going to do when I can't talk to my mom the same, as often. So,
And it's funny because my parents were married 54 years. They spent, I think, before my mom got sick and started to be hospitalized more frequently, they spent maybe 3 nights apart in 54 years. And they worked together, they did everything together. So the joke was my mom would check in with all the kids, debrief my dad. Sometimes he'd be on the phone with us. We wouldn't even know he was there because he was doing 16 other things, right? But so when that went away, I didn't even realize that I had this expectation of my father that he in no way was prepared to fill. And that's no fault of his, right?
right.
So it's so interesting what bubbles up and how we have all these changing dynamics in a family that we're not even aware of, and that, we hold resentment towards people because they're not showing up. So it's been a learning experience for all of us as these things are.
Well, and I'm so grateful that my parents have had the health that they've had as long as they've had. And, last year we took a couple of mini road trips before all the COVID stuff happened. And I'm very grateful because you just never know none of us know, right?
Right.
None of us know.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so then talk a little bit more because I'm going to promote and put up your website. So Debbie Shear
Thank you.
Speaks.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So talk
Yeah.
more about your work, because what I would love is for people to say, I really want to hear more about Debbie. I want them to go check out your blog because you've got some really great, insights from, we just took like mini dives into these little,
Yeah.
into all these different pieces of your life, but you dive into them more deeply on your website. And so between speaking and emceeing, so how can people find you,
Yeah.
and how do you get them to come check you out a little bit more?
Yeah. Thank you for that. So Debbie Shear Speaks is my website. It's also my handle for everything Instagram, and I
Okay.
think LinkedIn, and I think Facebook, all the things that I don't really understand how they work, but they do work.
Yeah,
And
I'm the
so
same. Yep, gotcha.
yeah, and my MC work, what I hope people understand, especially in the world of virtual everything, that having an MC to help hold your event together, keep an event flowing, especially in the virtual space, provide humor when it's appropriate, is a game changer. Um, so I do a lot of that. I've been asked to do a lot of that. And then fundraising. I'm a benefit auctioneer. So I work with nonprofits during their, annual galas. And of course, this year looks completely different,
Right,
right? The
right.
event industry was the first industry to close down. It will be
Yep,
the absolute last industry to open.
yep.
And, I work with a lot of nonprofits that have had to be really brave and swivel to a virtual fundraising platform for their big event. And it's been amazing and wonderful. And, I love consulting with clients to help them really embrace the virtual platform and understand that you can connect with people virtually, right? There
Mhm.
is still connection points. Um, and then the humorous piece. I do speaking on all sorts of things, whether it's how to add more humor into your life and better understand what we find funny and why we find it funny. Um, how to talk about, I love using humor to talk about the difficult things. So we are right now, as we mentioned earlier, we're in it, right? Our country's
Right.
in it. And
Yeah.
how do we use humor to build connection with other people? Because ultimately, we are creatures of connection. That's why we've survived as long as we have. That's why we will continue well after 2020 bids us farewell. And quite frankly, for many of us, it can't happen soon enough. So, but that connection piece, so we have to keep finding ways to connect. And I believe that using humor is the best way to make those connections.
So, okay, so I'm going to then detour the conversation. And I
Yeah.
don't know if you had a chance. I know you looked at this, but we hadn't talked about it. Normally I talk about it before we get on the video here about our 80s reference. So we've already connected on the perm situation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back, because you and I were both products of an era, like our parents had, very little television, and Elvis was like a big thing in the 60s, that shook up television. we came along and there was a whole bunch of different worlds that were opened up when MTV started, right?
Yes.
So, all right. So let's go back to your 80s because this is just the kind of the fun pivot at the end. I always want to hear what was it, either a show or something that totally resonates with you from the 80s.
Oh my gosh, I'm so bad with the decades, and I don't know what show was from what decade, but I can tell you what shows I watched a lot. I grew up with Little House on the Prairie. I loved it. I think it was before the 80s. It didn't matter. I
Didn't
would
matter.
watch the reruns. I
Yep.
loved it. My sister and I, we watched the Brady Bunch. We watched, I don't know, was that the 80s or 70s?
That was 70s.
I think actually.
I think those were 70s. Yeah, but it's still good. Yeah.
I think when I was, I graduated high school in '85, so I'm not sure how much TV I watched while I was in high school is the thing,
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
But yeah, so you and I mean, I think because I just turned 53, so I'm just a few weeks ahead of you.
Yeah, so. You are. Yeah. Yay.
But I think it's.
What was yours? What was yours favorites?
I loved, and somebody brought it up recently, Elf. I love that show. That was hilarious. And it wasn't on very long, but I watched the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
Partridge Family. Oh yeah. All those.
I watched whatever my dad usually watched, but I will tell you, I had such a crush on Magnum PI. I had a poster of him in my room. Oh yes. And awesome. Andy Gibb, same thing.
Andy Gibb, absolutely, Andy Gibb.
And I know that was before, but yeah. So.
Yeah, but was your father? My father loved every time he had MASH on. My father would just guffaw.
Yeah, so my dad loved MASH, but my dad watched. This is embarrassing to admit today in today's time. He loved. Oh God, he loved All in the Family. He loved the Jeffersons.
Archie and the Jeffersons,
which are just cringy shows when you watch them now because of what they were about. But he had his favorites, and it was a very religious experience for him. So I kind of would just sit along or do my own thing as a high schooler.
Yeah, but it's funny to go back and watch Jefferson's, Sanford and Son, and some of these shows and how they talked about our culture at the time, that if you put that on TV today, you'd be, oh my gosh, it would never work. You'd be ostracized, and so it's really interesting to take that little cultural snapshot of what it looked like back. The
evolution.
So
big
that's
time.
At least a positive note that we've at least made some strides.
Oh yes, we're all just works in progress, right? And that isn't always moving forward 100% of the time. You have to step back too, right? To refocus and maybe change your lens, and that's all positive as well.
Yep. And actually, that's perfect. That's a perfect way to segue out of here. So Debbie, thank you so much for joining me today. And actually, thank you for sharing not only with our audience today, but all those that you get to meet with and speak with, because I think sharing your message about the journey that you're on through humor is the best way to educate and inspire. So
thank you.
Yeah. And I hope our listeners understand, and again, take a deeper dive with what you've done by giving up alcohol, which I thought that was fascinating, how you said that was tougher socially to deal with than,
coming out as a lesbian. My God.
Who would ever have thought? Yeah. So there's much more to Debbie's story that I hope our listeners go check out. So, and I hope that they also continue to pause, critically challenge themselves, what they believe, and then embrace differences and figure out how to welcome them more into their world.
Love it. Thank you. Thanks, Wendy, for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And check out DestinationU.net for more resources and more information, and how to get in touch with Debbie if you can't find her right away. So thanks, guys. All right.